Hello and welcome to the beginnings of a new series here on ArchaeoSoup. Now you may recall a wee while ago we moved into the new ArchaeoSoup towers, and with that came an exciting new opportunity, namely a workshop space. Now in this workshop space I plan to explore experimental archaeology, maybe some flint knapping or papyrus paper making, so on and so forth, and I've had some wonderful suggestions from you. But sadly, there's been some environmental concerns which have come into play, namely the space floods. Now, while that is being fixed, I thought this series couldn't go ahead. However, today I had some unexpected spare time between things, and I thought, well, why not? Why not dive in and start this series off with gusto, and not necessarily have to make use of the workshop today. So I decided to show you this, or these. These are the things which are required to do lucet weaving, or I suppose chain fork weaving. This is a lucet weaver, or a chain fork, and this is a stick with a pointy bit on the end. Along with these you also need some yarn, or wool. Now if you want to join me in some lucet weaving, all you need to do is check out some of the links I'll put below. I'll put a couple of different options for you, and you can certainly purchase some of these prerequisites before we begin. But why would you want to begin, I hear you cry? That's a terribly, girly thing to do, some of you may well say. But actually lucet weaving has a good and long tradition. It's thought to date back to possibly the Viking era, and it's a very practical thing. What you result in, or what it results in, is this stuff. Lucet chain or lucet weave. It's kind of like plaiting, but using a wooden fork to do it, and obviously not requiring someone's head. But it's very practical. Actually, it was used to keep stuff in place, but we'll come back to that in a moment. It's a very practical skill anyway. Now, hopefully you've got your lucet stuff by now, and well, if you have, let's dive in. So this is the Lucet Weaver. Now obviously I'm shooting in first person here, so you have to forgive me if I'm slightly clumsy. The camera is in front of my face. However, this is all you need. You need a Lucet Weaver or chain fork. They're very pleasing in design, and as I've already said actually, they're believed to date back to the Vikings, so a very old thing actually. Saw a resurgence in recent years, especially with people becoming increasingly interested in knitting. So I'll just put that down there. You need a pointy thing to manipulate your wool, and here is the aforementioned wool. Now I haven't got loads of it here because I've already used a bit earlier this week to make a sort of a chain woven string to carry a flute around my neck. But here is how we proceed. So first of all you have to find the end of the wool. Let me just find that. There we go. Aha. And sort of get rid of the excess over there. And incidentally, I have to forgive the slightly manky nature of my hands. I've been doing practical work all week. Now you put this stuff in through the hole here, or rather this end in through the hole, and you hold it like that. Then you take the longer bit, not the end, and you put it like so, basically wrapping 2 figures of 8 like that. You need to make sure that you decide on which way you're going to do this figure of 8 and stick to it. So in other words, if you go in at the beginning and end up coming out at the end, you need to make sure that you do that every single time, otherwise the actual weave won't work. So there you go. So you've got 2 figures of 8 now, and next you take your manipulator and you do this. You take the bottom figure of 8, if I can just loosen it up a bit. There we go. And you manoeuvre it over the top of the fork, like so. You then do the same for the second figure of 8, which should be a little bit looser, and then you pull on here, and there you go, that's the first weave done. So then you repeat your figure of 8, this time over what was the top one, or the second figure of 8. Then you repeat the whole process again. So what was the second figure of 8 becomes the first, or the bottom one. You manipulate the string like so. Oop. Not quite there, like so, and like so. Once again, pull tight, and then once again you repeat. Now it's a good idea actually to make sure that the string is patted down like that each time, so that because you are going to probably move the figures of 8 towards the top of the forks, and if they get too close to the top, well, they'll come off and you'll lose your knit, your weave. So you can see the beginnings of the lucet chain forming here. And let's do another one. There we go. So pull that, tap it down a bit. There we go. Not too bad. Pull that loose, put it over the top. Pull that loose, put it over the top, and pull. There we go. And one more time. Here we are. Now, I could be here for minutes, if not hours, doing this, but I'm sure you don't want to watch the whole process unfold. So what I'll do is skip or fast forward, I think, at this point. So here we are, quite literally 2 minutes later, and it's looking quite good, isn't it? I'm quite pleased with it. Now, again, I've just finished putting one of the figures of 8 over the prong and through. So again, you repeat. There's my second figure of 8. Voila. Use the manipulator. And the funny thing is, when you're not doing this through a camera viewfinder, it's actually really rather quick and very therapeutic. So I would recommend it to anyone, in fact, anyone who's just interested in doing something which they know is sort of crafty, or perhaps even has a history to it. And what you end up with is something which I think is rather pleasing. It's a rather pleasing piece of string. Now, how you finish this it depends on the skill of the weaver. Some people suggest that what you do is you take off these 2 loops very carefully off the fork, and then you weave this. You basically pull that through these little loops which are on here. So you sort of pull this through itself and pull it tight. Now, to be honest, my fingers are just too large, and and that's just too fiddly for me. However, what I tend to do is, and let's imagine that I've done a good 20-30 centimeters here. What I tend to do is pull off the whole thing, and make sure not to let go of that, otherwise it'll just all uncoil. And then I just tie essentially a knot at the top. Now, yes, you do lose the last couple of weaves, or last couple of repetitions, I suppose, in this pattern, but it means you've got a nice secure ending, like that. There you go. See, I can pull that and it's not going to go much beyond that knot there. Look, it means you've got a nice secure ending, and you can use it for whatever you want to use it for. I would also recommend actually tying a knot at this end here, because technically it's not actually secured, it's just been nice and tightly woven up through the string there. So definitely do tie a knot there. I've just got glue on my fingers. Anyway, there you have it. Now, because you lose a little bit at this end, I'd recommend, if you're going to make this for a particular purpose, counting that as a loss. So make it a little bit longer than you need it for, and use the excess to tie off the lucet. But there you have it, a nice pleasing bit of lucet weaving. Now, this particular yarn is, or this particular wool is multicoloured. Obviously that's not necessarily historically accurate, but I find it very pleasing because it highlights the different weaves in this particular batch of lucet. Then again, you can get one monochrome yarn. Mrs. Soup has tons of the stuff just through in the living room, and that is just as pleasing to work with. In fact, actually, a slightly tighter form of yarn or wool might be a good idea, because this is very loose stuff. It's got quite a not much tension within the wool, which means it's slightly more springy than I would like. Now, what is lucet good for? Well, That's a good question. It is thought that actually lucet was used for hanging things. So typically you'd have early medieval folk especially would have a garment which was basically what we think of as being a tunic. What often people would call it a tunic today. With trousers, shoes, sometimes some sort of winnegers, or it was kind of like medieval mud bicycle clips for the bottom of the trousers. But also as well, they'd have a belt around their tunic onto which they would hang things, or around their neck they would hang things. And lucet, it was thought, was an excellent way of securing stuff, because it is a little bit springy, but it's not just one piece of string. It's not going to snap on your belt and you're not going to lose stuff. It's also quite pleasing to look at, and it's easily made. So men, women, boys, girls, children, old folk, everyone could do some form of basic, well, craft work like this, and therefore it's very easy to use for running repairs. So lucet was practical, and it was used all the time, it is thought, by folk right from the Vikings all the way through to around about the 12th century AD. So there you have it, lucet weaving. What do you think? So there you have it, lucet weaving. I'm very pleased to have been able to start this series off finally. It's been bothering me for ages. Hopefully you have had just as much fun as I do and did when I used to do this all the time, actually, in a former life, when I worked in a certain Viking museum. I used to spend hours every day making lucet, and you will probably find, if you get into this, that you'll have tons of it all over the place. You'll be wanting to give it to people, maybe make things for people like, I don't know, bracelets or something, or offer people an opportunity to maybe add a cuff to their fine jumper, or whatever comes along. There's all sorts of things that we found ourselves using lucet for when I was working at that museum. But anyway, lucet weaving is an interesting skill, and even if you don't give it a go, hopefully you've learned something new. So there you go. Now, hopefully this series will blossom into something rather grand and rather interesting, and there'll be other opportunities for you to have a go at other things. So it's not just going to be crafting, there'll be other forms of experimental archaeology going on. But nonetheless, today I'm happy to be able to bring you this unexpected beginning to this new series in the form of lucet weaving. Until next time, please do have a great next couple of days, and well, bye-bye.